Take this off. Well, good afternoon. We heard from Ambassador Herzog, very powerful testimony this morning about the situation in Israel, with Gaza, with Hamas, and with Chuck Schumer's comments this morning. To be with the ambassador the very day that Chuck Schumer took a swipe at the governance in Israel, the war cabinet, and specifically Prime Minister Netanyahu, was, in my point of view, but more importantly, the ambassador's way out of line, very inappropriate, and I believe that he should apologize. It's not our role to question democracies and elections. We have our own politics. It's our role to support them against terrorist organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, and ultimately Iran. We're here today to talk about the foreign policy, I think, is one of the most important issues. And we don't, in Congress, maybe talk about it as much. Our committee does. If we don't have our national security, we have nothing as a nation. And I just want to give you a brief overview of the events under the Biden administration that I think have created a more dangerous, more threatening environment probably since World War II, my dad's war. My dad's war, we had Chamberlain and Hitler. And Chamberlain basically signed a document that Hitler said wasn't worth the paper it was written on. And then we had Churchill come along. And then we had deterrence. Then we had strength. I've seen this many, many decades, over our historical time as a nation. When we project strength, we get peace. When we project weakness, we invite aggression and conflict and war. And that is the position we're in right now, because we've been projecting this president, his administration, weakness, which has invited aggression that we've seen, where now we have 3 places in the world that are on the cusp of a world war. And it all really started, I would go back to Nord Stream 2, waiving the sanctions on Nord Stream 2 to allow Russian energy to go into Europe. Shortly thereafter, we saw Afghanistan implode in a horrific manner. We'll have General McKenzie and General Milley testify before my committee on Tuesday about the events. When the rest of the world and our adversaries saw that, they saw weakness. They saw the United States is not strong anymore. Putin saw it. He met with Chairman Xi in Beijing at the Olympics, and they cut a deal. And he told them, I'm going to invade Ukraine. I see weakness. And he did it. He made his move. He invaded Ukraine, and we're dealing with that problem today, that it is in our national security interest. We can't afford to let Putin roll over Ukraine and take over Moldova and Georgia and threaten the Baltics, which then clearly would invoke Article 5 of NATO. But at the same time, Chairman Xi is now threatening Taiwan. We went on a trip to Taiwan, and we were greeted with 10 battleships around the island, an aircraft carrier, and 70 fighter jets. Why? Because we were there, and we were meeting with President Tsai, and then we were sanctioned. And I tell you that story so you know the aggressive behavior and nature of the CCP right now. And then fast forward to October 7th, that monstrous day. I remember visiting with the Prime Minister Netanyahu just after the invasion, and he showed me the Hamas videos. And he said, I want you to take these videos back to your Congress and show them what they did to my people, and never forget what happened. So now we have these conflicts, and they're getting worse, not better. And deterrence will stop a world war from happening. But I'm very concerned. If we don't get this together, and soon, we will have a situation like my father's generation. So with that, I want to turn it over to French Hill, a great member on the committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, also Financial Services.
Thanks. Good afternoon. I think the ambassador made some incredibly important points at our lunch. One is, first, Hamas has to be defeated in Gaza. That's still the objective of the government of Israel, and the United States needs to stand behind that objective in an unambiguous way. And in my view, that's where we are on a bipartisan basis in the House. And that's where we need to stand. And that's why I think Chuck Schumer's position he took today on the Senate floor was out of step with that. And in my view, we need to stand by Israel, make sure that we do. And you all know my position on the supplemental appropriation. I support funding for Taiwan, for Ukraine, and for Israel. And there's nothing more important than we can do than urgently getting that done, as soon as possible. But the other point I thought that the ambassador made that's very important, follows up on what Chairman McCall laid out, is when we resolve governance in Gaza, led by Israel and Israel's allies, Egypt, the King of Jordan, help from Saudi Arabia, and decide how that's going to be best done for peace in Israel and for the Palestinians, where do we go next? Who is responsible? And that's Iran. It's Iran selling 80% of their oil to China, taking that proceeds and funding the IRGC, killing Americans in Syria, in the region, backing the Houthis on shutting down navigation in the Red Sea, firing ICBM missiles, ballistic missiles, over Saudi Arabia into Israel, backing Hamas financially, backing Hezbollah financially, and as I say, a key partner in both money and technology for the Russians to kill Ukrainians. Iran. So going back to maximum pressure on Iran, letting Iran know that the United States, the West, will hold them accountable for what's happening here. This is no gray zone conflict. This is a direct conflict by leadership in Tehran against the West to dislocate the emerging, expanding peace commenced by President Trump with the Abraham Accords and the rapprochement of the Biden administration with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I don't see it hard to connect those dots. So while we back the government of Israel in eliminating Hamas, we work with Israel as a partner with the right neighbors to create a new governance model. In Gaza, we have to remember that as leaders in the Western world, we need to make sure that Iran is held accountable. And let me bring up the chairman of the Pacific for the Foreign Affairs Committee, Congresswoman Young Kim.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Chairman McCall and Chairman French Hill and their leadership, because French and I both serve on the Financial Services Committee, but my work on the Foreign Affairs Committee as chairwoman of the Indo-Pacific Subcommittee, I would like to talk a little more about how Biden's failed policy is creating distrust from our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific. We are in a strategic competition with Chinese Communist Party, but under this Biden administration, we're losing. Our allies don't trust us, and our adversaries don't respect us. I hear this as I travel to the region, leading 2 CODELs that I had last year in the South China Sea, and early this year, I took the delegation in a bipartisan way to Southeast Asia. And when I met with our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific region, they expressed frustration that the Biden administration are not showing up. And especially in those key engagements, for example, late last year, it was in Indonesia, when Foreign Minister has told me and my delegation that the president has sidestepped coming to Indonesia when they were hosting the ASEAN summit, instead decided to go to Vietnam. This year, obviously, we hosted the APEC summit in San Francisco, and I can talk about that a little bit, but they see the weakness and they see how our words do not match with the actions. And we've seen top Biden officials stonewalling Congress. And they're going out of their way to engage with the CCP officials, even lifting sanctions on CCP entities that have committed human rights abuses just to get a meeting. And when they come back, I ask those same administration officials, what are the deliverables? They tell us, we got a meeting and we're going to continue our dialogue. That is not result. The CCP's recent moves also, let me tell you, toward the United States and our allies, from spy balloons and surveillance bases to stealing our intellectual property and producing fentanyl, cannot go unnoticed and unchallenged. In October of last year, at the APAC meeting, in order to counter our concerns about China utilizing their Chinese syndicates to bring in the precursor chemicals that comes into our country that goes into making fentanyl, which is the number one reason why there are millions of Americans die because of that. What does our Biden administration do? Work with China and create a fentanyl working group. To this day, I have yet to see any deliverables or results from that working group. From Europe to Middle East, to the Korean Peninsula, Taiwan Strait, our adversaries are emboldened by this administration's lack of resolve. So we're here as members of the Foreign Affairs Committee, as a chair of the Indo-Pacific Subcommittee. I'll do my part and press for answers and transparency from this administration so we can hold authoritarian regimes accountable and bring back the American leadership on the world stage. Thank you for being here.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you, Young Kim. And we'll take any questions you may have. Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to ask for an update on your efforts to fund Ukraine, particularly if seizing Russian assets or lend-lease are going to be part of that.
Well, I can't get into a whole lot of details. You know, the relevant chairwomen are working on this. That would be my committee, House Intelligence, Armed Services, the appropriators, the relevant appropriators, and, working on a path forward, a version that would have our imprimatur, a House version. One thing that French and I have worked on very closely that was a glaring omission was what you've identified. It's a repo act that I introduced and marked up out of my committee, which would allow us to begin to gain access to these frozen Russian sovereign assets to help pay for this effort. It's a very popular idea. The Senate actually marked it up out of their committee, but they added other provisions and for some reason did not put it in their supplemental. So there are things like that I think that would be easy. I think I've had discussions like with Lindsey Graham about a loan program for direct government assistance, which I think would be a very popular idea. And other things like strategy and ATACMS and deploying weaponry that they need to win. I mean, Colin Powell's right. You either get all in or you get out. This administration has slow-walked this process for over 2 years, which has culminated in a stalemate. And I would argue that's exactly what he wants. And he thinks he's winning now because he has brought it to a stalemate. And I do think I agree with my colleagues in French that those pieces are vitally important, not just Ukraine, but the Israel pieces we heard from the ambassador and the Indo-Pacific. I signed off on 20 weapon systems to Taiwan that have yet to go into country, some dating back 4 years ago. So we meet with President Tsai, and she says, where are my weapons? I paid for them. That's the weakness that I'm talking about. Yeah, Max.
With regards to the funding package, does it seem clear to you that just taking the Senate supplemental in the House, is that idea over and the real path is drafting a House bill, which will then have to go through the Senate? And then what's your response to Democrats who say Ukraine doesn't have that kind of time, the House and Senate
No.
to pass it?
Right. Well, I think we need to pass it, like, it's dire, so we need to pass it soon. I know the speaker wants to go through the normal appropriations process, and I respect that. But I'm sorry, what was the beginning?
Are you giving up on the Senate supplemental?
Oh, the Senate.
It's not going to fly.
I think this is just Michael McCall talking, Chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee. I think we can do a better job than the Senate did. And I think we can deliver a product that the American people will end up supporting rather than the version that came out of the Senate. That's just my opinion. I know there are high-level discussions about this, obviously. So, yeah.
Also following on the Ukraine aid question, has the speaker given you a commitment that he would put a bill on the floor?
I don't want to get into personal conversations with him, but it is my belief that he will. But it would be after the normal appropriations.
Are you worried at all if that if you're not able to come to an agreement with this bill on the floor, that a discharge petition that would then succeed that could
I'm worried about that. I don't think that is in our best interest. I think that undermines the speaker's authority. And I don't see a lot of Republicans supporting that idea. I know there have been a lot of discussions about it, though. No. Yes.
Following up on the topic of the discharge mission, you've been on the record before saying that you don't support that effort, but you also say that Ukraine needs money, needs the support now, the effort is dire. Will a certain point in time come where you say, I will sign the discharge petition because this is the speediest way to get legislation to the floor, considering the situation is dire?
Well, my hope is that we work the normal process with the relevant authorizers and appropriators and get past next week and finish our normal appropriations bills, get all those done, and then we entertain the supplemental. That would be,
How long are you willing to give?
well, it's a hypothetical I really can't answer. I think we got one more last question. Yep.
Thank you, Germany's Handelsblatt. Different topic on TikTok. As a supporter of the TikTok bill this week, do you also support reported plans by former Secretary Mnuchin to possibly buy TikTok, and what would that mean for the fate of the bill itself?
I think if Secretary Mnuchin wants to engage in an investment to buy it, I'd be very supportive. My ideal outcome of this whole thing was for an American company to buy it. And what I really like about the bill, and we've gone through the threats of TikTok, but the real threats are the algorithms, not the algorithms themselves, but the propaganda that was put into the algorithms to drive a narrative like the Hamas Palestinians against Israel. That's just one example. Or pro-China, or pro-Russia. If an American company owns this, we also own the content. And we won't have a foreign adversary manipulating the algorithms to drive, their own propaganda machine. So that's why I do support. I voted for the bill, and I would support any American that thinks it's a profitable enterprise. I personally think it is. I don't know, Fritz, would you like to comment on that, beyond financial services?
I just think that's the heart of the American legislation, is to take TikTok as an entity with 175 million users and have it under an American ownership, not subject to the national securities laws of a company headquartered in Beijing. ByteDance is obligated to follow the national securities laws of the CCP. And one of those obligations is sharing all data, access to all computer technology, IT systems, what's in the cloud, and therefore, and the algorithm intellectual property. And that's what's putting people potentially at risk. Plus, that's informing data analytics in China about the views and daily lives and daily operations of 175 million Americans that could be weaponized at any point in the future. So Congress took, I think, a conservative decision, which is we're not banning it, but we're recommending that there be divestment of ByteDance to an American entity. Let me turn back to the Ukraine question just for a moment. I fully support Ukraine finance. I've been to Kyiv twice in the last 5 months. I know how urgent it is. But I also want to give Speaker Johnson the room as a new speaker from whom he's had inherited a tough situation to deliver an approach that he'd like to try. And I think that's a fair-minded thing to do. And I think we have the time and the resources to do that. Secondly, I think the Repo Act is drafted by Chairman McCall, amended by me, marked up in committee. We passed it 20-2 in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, 40 to some small number 40-2 in our committee and 20-2 over in Senate Foreign Relations. That shows you the importance of this. There's $5 to $8 billion of Russian sovereign assets in the United States. We want that money available in a fund to be administered by the Secretary of Treasury and others, the President, to work with Ukraine on the best use of that. And we want a strong bill here. This isn't about what bill might pass in the European Union. This is about what bill should we pass here. The stronger we pass it, the more ability we give that flexibility to the President and to Western leaders to work with Ukraine, the better. And we got a Council of Europe approach, a vote of all the Central European countries fully in support of seizing the Russian Federation assets and converting them to a fund for the benefit of Ukraine, both current Ukraine financial needs or reconstruction or some combination. But America is just a small part of the assets, but we're a big part of the voice. It's our leadership that's needed here, and that's why the House and Senate must include repo as amended as a part of this supplemental request. It will produce more votes on the House floor, and it will produce more action in Europe, and will produce a better outcome for Ukraine in the short run and in the long run. Yeah. And I just think it's an essential. So whatever comes to the floor, that needs to be a part of it, whether it's a Johnson proposal, a McCall proposal, a Senate proposal, or whatever. That's the importance, in my view, of that issue.
And to echo that, I think if we pass that, it does send a strong message to our NATO allies and we are supposed to lead, right? The United States of America. I don't think we are leading as well now, but we have normally led the NATO effort. That would open up over $300 billion in frozen assets. And, we've had discussions with our counterparts, interparliamentary discussions. They're all very interested in this idea. And I'm hopeful, and I think to French's point, if we can get that passed, just that alone would make a significant difference. So. Oh, Haiti. Thank you. Very dire situation. This will be the last question because I think I'll get in trouble with Elisa's staff if I don't cut this off. But it's very dire. The Prime Minister is out of country. He will be stepping down when some form of governance comes to the island. It's very unclear what that is going to look like. Kenya cannot bring in their people until there is a form of governance in Haiti. But meanwhile, the island has been overrun by the warlords, and my job is to ensure we've already freed up $10 million from a congressional notification. Not one dime has been spent. I don't want to throw any more money or guns into Haiti until I get assurances it's not going to go directly to the warlords, because that would be the absolute worst outcome for the future of Haiti. And so that's sort of where we are in the process. We have a few deliverables we've asked for. There's a 32-page report. The NSC is supposed to give us an intelligence assessment, on the lethality issue and the weapons, and any chance for governance. But this is a culmination of a year's worth of neglect by this administration. We had a hearing on this issue, and it was very clear that international law enforcement, INL, had very little presence, if any, in Haiti. And now it's resulted in this. And it's very tragic. But I have a commitment and I have a duty to the American people not to throw a bunch of guns and money into an island that's going to go to the wrong people. I'm prepared to do that once we have the proper assurances that it will be spent and used, correctly. So. Correct. Because the administration has still failed to come forward to give us the necessary reports, briefings to help us get to a point where we feel confident in terms of how the money is going to be spent and the weapons. This is not the first time in history the United States would have put guns and money into another country that backfired. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.